Welcome to another edition of Time for Forgiveness, the show that not only teaches you how to forgive, but also gives you compelling guests who share their stories on how they found the path to forgiveness. Now, please welcome your hosts. Here are Kelly and Bob Pascuzzi.
Well, hi there. It's another exciting episode, and talk about powerful today. This is Time for Forgiveness. We welcome you with open arms and get you on the path to forgiveness. I'm Sean Parr, one of your hosts with the amazing Bob and Kelly Pascuzzi. We're so blessed to have our special guest today. And Bob, why don't you introduce and we'll
Thank
get
you,
going.
Sean. I'm so enthusiastic to have Joe D'Amato with us today on Time for Forgiveness. Joe, welcome to the show.
So happy, so honored to be here. Been looking forward to this. Thank you.
Likewise, absolutely. Joe, I want to kind of set the stage with your background in terms of your time at SBO.
Okay.
And so maybe you can kind of tee that up for us a little bit. I'm going to jump in and share my insight around that ministry, but I'd like you to give our audience some insight into really your mission and what SBO is about.
You bet. Well, so I'm originally from the Garden State, which is New Jersey.
We won't hold that against you.
Yeah,
It's all good.
Yeah. You can take
kidding.
the boy out of Jersey, but you can't take the Jersey out of the boy. Although I think my accent, for the most part, is gone, except for a few words like water or Florida. Or
Nice.
it'll come out. But anyhow, yeah. So I grew up in I guess it'd be like northeast New Jersey, Watchung, New Jersey. So about 25 miles west of New York City. I'm the third of 8 kids.
Wow.
And big Catholic family. Grew up going to Catholic school. And I would say it wasn't until later in high school that I had more of a personal encounter, what I call my kind of personal encounter with God, where it became real and I knew His love and my life started to really change from the inside out. In college, I took a time, I was in seminary, so I was thinking about becoming a priest at one point. Was drawn to the idea of like how can I do good for the world, and wanted to discern that, and ended up leaving. And that's when I got involved with, like you said, Bob, SPO, St. Paul's Outreach. So this is a community on, now I think it's 54 campuses, but it's a faith-based group of college students and what we call full-time kind of missionaries who run any number of kind of faith support opportunities. So Bible studies, small groups, formation, social activities. Basically, how do you, during the time of college, maintain and really probably grow in your faith at a time where the secular campus isn't focused on faith, at least. We'll put it that way.
And Joe, to that point, if you look in the statistics and what you can read out there online, say only about 10% of students attend Mass on a regular basis. So the headwinds are strong, right?
Correct.
And there's a lot of things that are pushing back on the college campuses today.
Correct.
What are your thoughts about that? And how are you guys out trying to combat that and reverse the tide?
Yeah, that's right. So across I think all religions now, we're seeing a decrease in faith participation. There's so many stats, I'm not even sure which one to pick. For Catholics, there's one that's for every one new Catholic, we lose 6. And I guess what I would maybe highlight isn't so much how many are leaving, but really why they're leaving. And there is some research. And the truth is, many people are spiritual today. Many people don't look at the Bible and say, I don't believe it. What's happening is there's a Pew Research article that talks about young people seeing the church as hypocritical or too focused on money and power. There's some kind of actual relational disconnect. They go to a Mass and it feels like I'm sitting here on a cold pew. How does this relate to me? I don't get anything out of it. Why do I even go? They're not saying, oh, I just read some article that God doesn't exist, and so I'm out. So what we do is kind of provide a relational connection. So we have on all of our campuses, we have kind of full-time missionaries that are doing one-on-one mentorship, that are providing opportunities where you can really talk about your faith and talk about your life. So like small groups for like a young man to come and sit down and say, here's what I'm struggling with. And versus just kind of going out and like, everyone needs to go to mass and God is real and say a sinner's prayer. Building relationships with people and giving them a sense of connection to the church that speaks their language, and makes faith kind of real in their lives.
But have you found that these young men are willing to be vulnerable with you?
It's the number one challenge and opportunity right now with young men is there's all these notions about it's not okay to struggle. There was actually just a story in the National Catholic Register that came out last month, and they interviewed one of our missionaries, and he told a story of after his grandfather died, he went back to his frat house, okay? And long story short, the guys, and this is quoted in the article, told him to drink it off. And so it's kind of like it's not okay to be sad. It's not okay to struggle. It's not okay to be weak. It's not okay to cry. That's a real dangerous
It's
approach.
not that it's not even just okay. We're also taught just to hide it.
Hide it.
Suppress it.
Don't talk about it. If you're struggling with addiction of any kind, I mean, checking your screens, fear of how you look, I mean, all these kinds of things that, it's just buried. So one of my favorite parts is doing men's groups, one-on-one men's ministry, what we're about to get into, working with men who've come from broken families and saying, oh my gosh, there's so many wounds there that you may not have explored yet or talked about yet that's really affecting you. So that's I'd say one of the biggest things we focus on is how do we help men, both men and women, but men, I would say, connect with the church and help them open up.
Okay, wait. I have one more question before I just sorry to interrupt, but so I hear a lot of people and probably young adults as well. I'm really spiritual, but I'm not religious.
Totally.
So is your take on that they're saying they do believe in a God, but they don't feel connected?
Yeah. When somebody says that, our approach is like awesome, like that's incredible. I mean, right? Like that you have some that openness. That's like. We're cheering you on. So number one, just accepting and affirming kind of hearing them where they're at. And then, from there, I think it's probably dependent on the person, but what's going on is there's just some disconnect happening with them and faith. They think religion it's gotten just too rigid around what's right and wrong, or like I said, maybe it's gotten too into power or money, or there's they don't see religion as this wellspring. So,
and Joe, from that perspective, but then what is your interpretation of how the church is diagnosing this, understanding what's going on out there, and how they're going to react to that in a way that's going to support what they need? I mean,
so I would say that for Catholics, for those listening who are Catholic, the Catholic Church is catching up. So our Protestant brothers and sisters, frankly, have been doing a good job at this. So the ministry we work for, St. Paul's Outreach, has had a pretty strong presence at Johnson County Community College, which is just down the street. By the way, almost 20,000 daytime students, huge school. And when we got there 10, 11 years ago, the first people we sat down with was the InterVarsity group, which is a non-denominational Christian group, and said, how are you doing this? And they kind of taught us. So in fairness to young people, I think the church could have and probably needs to do more. We kind of need to look in the mirror and say, wait a minute, how are we talking about faith or not? Have we made Mass, have we made everything so... even I don't want to be ritualistic.
Accessible, more accessible.
Have we made it more accessible? Have we asked the right questions? Have we, you millennials, like bold questions. How would you describe your personal relationship with God? Just zip the lip, as we say, and listen. Don't judge. Don't give a feedback. Don't tell them anything. Just so I believe that the church is doing more. We are catching up, and we're becoming, like you said earlier, Bob. Some of the stats we did not talk about those for a while, and now we are. Locally, the Archbishop here. I mean, the for one New Catholic, we lose 6. That was an article in the Levin, which is a Catholic local paper. We're now saying, wait a minute, we've got a huge issue, and so we now need to employ these more evangelistic, more outreach, more come over and watch the March Madness game, the NBA playoffs, and have food with us or
fellowship.
Fellowship.
Yeah. Love that.
Relationship, regardless of where you're at. And by the way, when we start out doing this, there's no prayer.
Yeah.
The first quarter of our outreach, there's no, hey, everybody, maybe you say meal grace, but it's just relationship building.
Yeah.
We're not there yet. At a later point, we want to talk about your life and your wounds and what Jesus has to say. But yeah.
And Joe, and they've got great people like you that have a heart for this, and you've dedicated over a decade of your life, right?
Correct, yeah.
Tell me and tell the audience what led you to this, because I think this is our segue now, right, into your story. So let's go back and let's get into your story a little bit, and then how that segued into you being with SBO.
And if you're just joining us, Joe D'Amato is our special guest today on Time for Forgiveness, and this is the story we are anxious to hear as well.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. So as I kind of shared a little bit earlier, I did come from this pretty solid, large, so third of 8 kids, Catholic, Italian, Irish family. And then something pretty unusual started to happen that I think statistically is a little bit of an anomaly as well. So obviously my parents had been married, for just about 25 years, at this point. So when I was in somewhere in grade school, there was an incident where I remember my parents getting in a fight and the police coming to our house. And I didn't really know what happened. I knew there was some kind of altercation. I knew it wasn't like somebody was seriously hurt. At least I didn't see that. But there was, 2 or 3 police officers came into our house, and I remember one just saying, "Hey, man, you can go back to bed." It was kind of like this bizarre experience, and I went back to bed and woke up and kept on doing life. So other than that, it was this strong, beautiful family. And then, so college happened. So, where my story is like a lot of people is you go to college and your mom and dad aren't there, maybe your siblings or close high school friends or cousins or a lot of the people maybe that you were tight with might not be there. And it really, it is such a difficult place to practice your faith. Mm-hmm. I can say I missed Mass on Sunday in college, not... I stayed mostly very faithful, but it's a hard time. Mm-hmm. So there was that. And then it was my sophomore year that things started to hit the fan. So I was home. I had a little side business, like shoveling driveways and mowing lawns in high school, college. Actually, it was I loved it. I had a little LLC and like being an entrepreneur. So I was home, and there was a pretty big altercation between my parents. The police were called, and a 10-day restraining order, temporary TRO restraining order, was signed against my dad. And so that was like holy cow, wake up call. And then over the course of the next year and a half, probably somewhere around 6 or 7 more police visits.
Wow.
Just fighting. You hear about an emotionally unsafe environment, and you might say, well, what does that really mean? This was an emotionally unsafe environment. I had 5 younger siblings, so hitting, yelling, fighting. Unfortunately, what can happen in a divorce is parents against parents, sibling joins this parent, sibling joins this parent. Now you got clash. And I mean, some pretty intense moments of anger I shared with you. I mean, holding down one of my siblings as hard as I could from going after another family member in anger, you know. Actually, it was 2011. It was Holy Thursday, so the Thursday before Easter. And me and some of my siblings got subpoenaed to court because there was, in this case, a permanent restraining order that was being pursued by one of my parents. And I mean, I remember like going into a courtroom, like swearing in and going up on a stand and answering the questions of these two attorneys, seeing both my parents, each with their lawyers. I mean, it was kind of a nightmare.
I'll bet.
And I mean, I'm not getting emotional right now, or at least not yet, but it was in a very emotional, heartbreaking time. And it kind of coincided with a lot of my own insecurities as a man that I had struggled with, I think, all my life. But I started to see maybe where they came from as this was happening, or understand them a little bit more as my relationship with my parents became very, very challenging to navigate. I mean, extremely challenging. You know, for Christians, we have the fourth commandment, which is honor your mother and father. It's my favorite. I don't know if it's the most important one, but I love that that's above so many others. And there's something, I think, very on just even a human level about how we honor our parents, that in our relationship with our parents, that just affects our psychology and our sense of self. But so, I mean, this is when we can get into this idea of forgiveness and becoming a person of forgiveness has really started to unfold. So I began to experience that, like, people are not just like born bad. I don't believe that. I think most people probably don't. I mean, as hard of situations as we're aware of, people aren't born bad. And so I had to kind of understand what my parents had been through, and there's a whole story. So they ended up getting divorced. They had gotten married in the Catholic Church. They ended up getting an annulment after 25 years, this is not very common.
Yeah.
But I could go on and share one of them, the abuse, what they had dealt with growing up, made a whole lot of sense for why they may struggle with what they struggle. But it took kind of a forgiveness mentality to be willing to see that. So I began to see how, okay, other young people like myself who are going through things like this, I could see why they do bad things. I could see why they get angry. I could see why they choose to stop talking to a parent. I had a sibling basically until close to the last minute say one of my parents wasn't coming to their wedding, and to her credit, she ended up inviting that parent. But you could see why people could turn to drugs, to any kind of thing to numb the pain inside.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And so it was at this time that all through at Seton Hall University, there was a St. Paul's Outreach Strong chapter. There still is today. I had good friends. I had good support, men and women, honestly, that got me through this. Okay. Without them, I wouldn't be here, I don't think. And so I became very passionate. It's my passion to kind of help young people in those college, young adult years navigate life, work through their hurts. Maybe it's a death, maybe it's another traumatic situation. My family, there was like a bankruptcy, there was financial strain involved. It was like a total breakdown. So there's so many things people are going through today. And so that's my favorite part is taking the 4 or 5 years of a very negative experience and then now being able to help others through it simply just by walking with them. I can't fix their issue, but loving them through it. And so, yeah.
Right. Well, Joe, you're a very loving father. You talked about your wife before we got started with today's podcast. This sometimes, as we've seen in the past, is a generational thing. And it sounds to me like you did the homework and you went back to what they went through and then watched them kind of go through the same thing. And you've made a conscious decision to seek help, to obviously there was some struggle, because I feel your struggle with the forgiveness of not only your parents, but some of your siblings as well, that they need to understand a little bit more. Is that right?
Yeah. So it's funny you say that. So my wife is also, her parents are also divorced. And so the two of us were actually, about 4 or 5 years ago, we're on a conference, and the speaker was leading the group through some declarations, which I think anyone, regardless of faith, can do. But we both went through this declaration of so we said, in Jesus' name, divorce stops here, or divorce stops now. And it was super powerful. And it's something that I think every word we speak has power.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah.
I mean, I'm saying a lot of words right now, and we can kind of speak too much. Maybe I am. But so, I mean, this is like a practical tip. Saying in Jesus' name as a Christian, or if you're not, I think you can still say, I renounce divorce or depression or pain, etc., and I choose life and a bright future and joy. So absolutely. Can I just share a quick quote?
Sure.
So one of the books I brought with me is a book called The Mindful Catholic, by a younger-ish doctor, a beautiful book. And he's talking about awareness and this idea of sensing and living in the moment. And he shares a quote from a Catholic saint, Saint Therese of Lisieux. I think I'm pronouncing that right. And I just want to read it. So she says, "We should judge our neighbor favorably in every circumstance and make it become a habit of ours to overlook his faults, just as we almost spontaneously give ourselves the benefit of the doubt. Let us also make this an integral factor of our relations with those about us." So for me, it was seeing that my parents and my siblings, like you said, were acting out of pain. And I mean, we were talking about these beautiful words of Jesus on the cross, Father, forgive them, okay? And then what I think is probably one of my favorite lines, most interesting lines, is, for they know not what they do.
You bet.
So this is someone who's talking to the people who, just trying to make this real. What if someone came to my house, if someone tried to sue me, if somebody tried to arrest me, if somebody tried to kill me? He's up there, he's on a cross, his mom is there, he's embarrassed, he's dying, he's been flogged, and he can kind of they don't understand what they're doing. He can kind of judge them favorably in a way. Now, I'm aware people listening very well may have gone through more traumatic things, and I know your story. So I want to just speak sensitively, not just say everyone should just presume the best of other people who hurt them. That may not be helpful to hear, but I do believe part of forgiveness is, okay, one of my parents was abused. One of my parents had their own parent go through a period of depression and didn't even speak with them. And one of my parents' 4-year-old sibling died when they were younger, and that affected their, okay, wait a minute. Now, that's not an excuse, for people to hurt others, if you've been through, so you need to get help. And I say this in humility. I'm hoping to kind of break a cycle.
Right.
So I go to therapy. Shout out. I mean, I was there last week. Huge. Absolutely. I've got a great therapist that I see about once or twice a month right now. Still, I'm dealing with anger and rage and other struggles from this. But I think that's part of what it means to forgive, is to somehow see others as acting out of their own hurts.
And Joe, you mentioned this before we got rolling today, that our spiritual DNA is perfect. We're born in God's image and likeness. That's
Amen.
perfection.
Amen.
And so what happens between the time of birth to whatever, it's environment. But you also touched on something I think is very important. It's also genetic. It's genetics, where it's passed down from generation to generation to generation. And it forms our thought process and habitual behavior over time. And so if we can detach from the person being a bad person and why are they engaging in this behavior? And I know obviously when you're in high school and your formative years, that's not easily understandable. But through God's grace, you came to the awareness, because that's really what it is. It's understanding.
Absolutely.
And so it's faith based on understanding that you could appreciate and have compassion for them.
Absolutely.
And then more importantly is you are able to turn pain into purpose here.
Absolutely.
And so I just want to recognize you.
Absolutely.
And,
So if you're listening right now and you've been through a traumatic experience of pain, somebody's hurt you, I believe that in time there can be and will be an opportunity for you to turn that to good. So like I was just thinking, by the way, some of the shows that you go ahead. Yeah.
That's I just want to hit on that, because I have heard people, and maybe I've said it before too, that there's purpose in this, the bad event. And I really thought about it, and I think it's correct as to what you said. The purpose is what you do next. That's where the purpose is, because we do have a choice. And I think Bob had said there's an awareness, but there's also a choice. And in that quote, which is so beautiful, it's a habit to start looking for the good and looking to be favorable in those moments of judgment with others.
I think one of the important things to realize and understand is that when we judge, we cut off all potential to influence that person. So if we can perceive more, right, ask better questions. Why are they engaging in that behavior?
And I like what you said also, Joe. The path to forgiveness or the path to freedom is through forgiveness. And I feel, and I'm so glad you talked about your therapist, and a lot of people are afraid to say, I'm reaching out for help. I applaud anybody that goes to a therapist to get that help, because it's a neutral person that can turn that, the corner for you, that can not judge you. They don't know anything. They're just listening intently to your story and helping you through it. And God will guide you through it as well. We know that. If he leads you to it, he'll lead you through it. We know that. But if you want to get that freedom, there's so much in your life, just you yourself, that needed to be forgiven.
Absolutely.
To that path to freedom.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you said this. Your declaration with your wife of divorce stops here was so powerful.
Amen. Yeah, absolutely. So this is where I think it gets interesting. So you've been saying, okay, I can see the good in others. I think there's a sense in which it starts with seeing the good in yourself. And I'm going to try to articulate this, but I can forgive others insofar as I have embraced forgiveness. And what I mean by forgiveness is not just for something bad I did, but this sense of, we believe and we teach shame has no place in life. We would say if you've done something bad, maybe you should feel guilty about that act, but you should not feel shame about who you are, okay? So any sense of unworthiness if you're listening now, any sense that you are not good, that you've not done enough, that you've fallen behind, that you aren't enough, that you don't have what it takes, is a lie. And from this belief that I am good, and there's nothing someone could do that could take that away. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what Jesus, I think being able to forgive starts kind of with this identity of, I have this sturdiness in my identity and who I am, that actually, even though this bad thing happened to me or this person did a bad thing to me, it hasn't shaken the core. You may have been robbed, abused, neglected. And again, it's easier said than done. This is where therapy comes in.
Yeah, sure.
And prayer.
But have you seen then the young adults that you're talking about that are starting to become vulnerable? Is that probably one of the most number one issues is worthiness, identity?
100%. Worthiness. Absolutely. The sense that I'm good enough, I'm wanted, I'm chosen. I mean, we're now living the United States Surgeon General last May released what they call an epidemic of loneliness in the United States. And this is a whole nother podcast. But yes, the sense that the lack of connection, and by connection I mean acceptance of who you are for who you are. That's connection. The sense that I love you because of who you are, not because of what you can do for me or have done or will do. The unconditional, non-judgmental love that I believe is God. And so,
and not to interrupt you here, Joe, but this is an important point. And how do you tell a student in college, how do they experience that?
They have to, hopefully they feel it from you. So we have this line that they won't care about what you say until they know you care about them. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like we need to say less, show more. So a lot of what our missionaries do, what I've done is just spending time with people. So during my divorce, one of the missionaries, when I was a student at Seton Hall, 2010 or 11, we ran the New Jersey Marathon, and he just spent time with me. He didn't have a book like I have all these books and teaching you all these things, right. But it was the love I felt from a brother. And yes, things would come up naturally, and I'm struggling with this, and can we say a prayer about this right now? Can you pray with me? I think it's a felt experience of fellowship. Someone, a lot of what our missionaries do is just, hey, do you want to grab coffee? The sense of being pursued and wanted is, we live in a crisis of feeling unwanted or unconnected. So with that said, I think there is, because when we speak, when I say God loves you, that can be cold as ice. If to some people.
Sure.
Some people will say, okay, yeah, they can internalize that, they sense it, they believe it, and it's true. Yeah. But we got to be careful not to almost speak too soon or speak out of place. And yes, God loves you. Yes, even saying, yes, you are good or you are enough. Those are all nice things that can kind of be like water off a duck's back. In the context of, I hear you, I see you. Mm-hmm. And I know you're struggling with your looks, with your grades, with your finances, with you haven't dated yet, you haven't, whatever you're going through, with you have dated so many times you feel used, whatever, then then Jesus starts to walk with you.
Do you find that in dealing with this age group that what has happened to one person is probably happening to most people, most students? Mm-hmm. Would you agree with that? To some degree.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so it's not necessarily what's happening, it's the interpretation of what's happening and what they choose to do with it.
Totally.
I think there's a lot of, and this is my opinion, but there's a lot of this, I am this, I am that, and that then they attach their meaning, their worth to that, whatever that is. I am lonely, I am unworthy, I am depressed, I am angry, and then therefore they become that. And we have to be able to separate, as you said this a minute ago, that the individual is perfection in God's image and likeness. They've just, for whatever reason, for a multitude of things that can go on in our life.
But I think what you're not saying is you shouldn't say I'm this, but it's saying I'm feeling this way. It's not that I am this thing.
Right.
And go ahead.
No, I'm just saying.
Yeah. And on the flip side, I am also not basketball player. I'm not 4.0 GPA.
And we're focusing on what's missing.
Well, because
Most people are focusing on what's missing.
But if that goes away, then you're like, I don't even know who I am because that was my identity.
I remember I got a 4.0 my fall of my freshman year. I mean, it was great and all, but it was like it was like becoming my thing. I remember I got invited to this special event with all the 4.0. It was like fun and all, but it was great when I finally got the B, to tell you the truth. It was like I felt free.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's society. That's our social networking. People get on the Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and all these things, and we're not blaming one particular thing, but there's so much involved. But in today's society, there's a lot that creates a lot of that pressure that can isolate people and make them feel lonely and insecure and searching, Kelly, as you said, for their identity.
Totally. And then that manifests itself in a lack of connection. So now my relationships with people are limited or just not what I really want them to be. I mean, that's really what we want, right? I mean, you can be in the beautiful hills of Santorini and be like, I wish there was somebody here with me to enjoy this, right? You could have everything and anything, and yet you still, I wish my brother was here.
Right. Something's still not right.
Something's still
not right. Yeah.
Something's still not freaking right.
So what, Joe, going forward with your ministry, what is your hope for not just SPO, St. Paul's Outreach, but in general dealing with this group of age group? What is your hope for that age group?
Absolutely. So I would say the thing I'm most passionate about is the restoration or renewal of family life, which I think probably starts with marriage. And when I say marriage, what I really mean is marriage prep, which is really where the issue is.
Well, okay, and the issue there is, go ahead with that first, if you would.
Well,
the issue is what?
The issue is, am I entering a relationship with somebody where I'm able to freely give and show who I really am, and I'm willing to see who they really are, and I'm able to love them, and I'm not putting on them the pressure to be my God. So they're not making me whole, ultimately. I have the wholeness myself. I have the security, sturdiness of who I am to kind of give love and receive. But the relationship is not this almost like what is, who's that, Kesha? Your love is a drug, right? It's not, I'm not kind of turning to this because that can become an unhealthy thing where a relationship,
like
a dependency, right. An attachment or dependency. And so hopefully that leads to healthier, stronger marriages, which, and I mean, I could talk about a lot of different research, but good family starts with good marriage, and the love that the mother and the father have for each other and the way they express it to and from each other actually is where the kids feel loved, because they know I'm half you and I'm half them. And so as you love each other, you're kind of loving me because I come from each of you.
Well, I think it's important, like you said, it's the example, and it's not what they only see; it's they feel it as well.
It's their blueprint.
It's the blueprint.
Going forward.
It's Sunday. It's Sunday night dinner every week. It's Christmas. It's felt. It's not. It's like we have I mean, my therapist, and he's not speaking from a religious standpoint, has told me the breakdown of family. I mean, it's like, I don't even think we understand how catastrophic it is.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, when I see young men and young women who come from broken homes doing bad things, I have so much compassion. I do. I mean, and I'm not suggesting I condone what happens. I actually did prison ministry for the first time last Saturday. And I spoke with a young man who's about my age. And I saw another, I didn't get to speak with him, a younger man who's probably 19 or 20, 21. And I sat there and I said, I have nothing but and I get it. You've done something bad. And there's justice. I mean, for Catholics last night, the Holy Thursday first reading was executing judgment was part of the reading. I believe there's justice. We don't live in a world where everything goes. But so you need to serve some time, and hopefully this will help you. But it's compassion. It's being able to.
But I think what you're getting at as well is it's that one moment does not define that person.
Yes.
Their entire life.
Correct.
Their entire.
I mean,
This is one of the things that we wanted to point out in the ravine, the story with Danny, that one act is horrible as it was in the moment, did not define who he was in his entirety, his life.
Let me share this. So later in the scriptures, there's another really beautiful forgiveness story that I think anyone can learn from. And it's the story of Stephen, who was the first martyr. And similar to Jesus, Stephen makes this act of forgiveness as he's being killed. So he's being stoned, and he says, do not hold the sin against them. Well, the next line's interesting. Guess who was the one doing it? Saul. And Saul was consenting to his death. For Christians, St. Paul is probably the best, the most prolific evangelist, the writer of many of the New Testament scriptures. This guy was a killer. This was a man who did probably way worse things than anyone listening right now could understand. Or maybe not. I don't want to presume that. But Saul, I mean, but this goes back to, can you receive forgiveness? Even if you haven't done, do you believe in this moment, can you have a grace moment, a God moment where you know you've been forgiven, that meaning your shame is gone, meaning you can have a bright future. You have a good, happy life ahead of you, regardless of what's happened.
And so, Joe, in The Ravine, have you seen the movie The Ravine or read the book? Okay, that's fine if you haven't. Please do, because I think it's very appropriate with what we're talking about. The scene where Danny is going off the ravine and he's going to kill himself, commit suicide. Before he does that, he says, "Forgive me, Father. I'm asking for forgiveness."
Okay.
Do you believe in that moment that Danny, or metaphorically any person in that situation who had just committed, do you believe that at that moment he was granted forgiveness?
Yes.
Okay. And why do you believe that?
Okay, great. I mean, this is a beautiful topic. So, and I want to kind of call
Because not everybody does.
Not everybody does. We've and we, Kelly and I, when we believed, and God sent that, we put that in there.
Absolutely.
I'm asking why you believe that.
Why? Okay, I'll go at this from a couple different ways. Number one, so I realize not everyone listening now is Catholic. There may be some of us here may be are Catholic. So the Catechism, paragraph 982 says, this is directly from the Catechism, so a screenshot, I'm not paraphrasing. There is no offense, however serious, that the Church cannot forgive. There is no one, however wicked and guilty, who may not confidently hope for forgiveness, provided his repentance is honest. Why? Because in that moment, he has a sincere act of repentance, right? So you said, as he's going, he says, "Father, forgive me." That's why. And by the way, even if he didn't say that, it could have happened in his heart, and we don't know. We cannot judge. So the Church, I mean, there's a Bishop Barron. I mean, I can give you a lot of higher authorities who will say this. We don't know anyone's in hell. We cannot say, well, this person's there. Christ who died for all men desires that in his church the gates of forgiveness should always be open to anyone who turns away. So always. So we don't understand what someone's going through in that lapse moment of judgment as the car goes over or they go over the bridge or whatever. So we absolutely cannot and should not make that judgment. In fact, I mean, people could probably make a better case that your, culpability, which is a big word, but your culpability is probably meaning the degree that you are responsible for what you did, right? So if somebody, I don't like this analogy, but if somebody puts a gun to my head and says, do this, that's different than if I did that without them doing the gun to my head. Even though I did the same thing, the culpability changes. So any person's culpability in that moment is likely significantly hindered mentally.
How would you respond to somebody, Joe, that says, well, that doesn't match up with my theology, what you just said?
Well, I mean, if this person's Catholic, we have a lack of formation in the church. I mean, there's even divorce. People think divorce is a sin. Okay? In order to get an annulment, you need to be divorced. That's part of your application. And an annulment comes from the church. Divorce is a social issue. Now, often, most of the times, there can be acts of infidelity and sinfulness there. But a divorce in and of itself is not. It's just it's a social contract. So there's a lot of unfortunately, there's a lot of misunderstanding, I would say, in the church. Someone who's saying that is lovingly just probably trying their best, just doesn't understand, and it's not true. That's not what the church teaches.
And I'm not saying it is. I just wondered how you would respond to it.
Yeah. I'm trying to think what else. I mean, this is the hard one because, again, and I want to take it away from just is so and so perpetrator who did all these bad things still good inside, or could they still have received the mercy of God before dying? I think the answer is yes. We could speculate all day about that. I think it's still we should bring it back to ourselves. Do I not just in this moment as I'm listening now, but do I believe I'm good inside?
Exactly.
Wow. Yeah.
It goes back to the worthiness thing.
Yeah, worthiness. I mean, and if you're struggling to forgive right now, first of all, that's probably a sign that you're doing something right. It's hard. So you're on the right track. Good for you. Way to go. And I would say there might be something about your identity right now as you're listening that can be shored up or sturdied up, that you can experience a freedom that what this person, and maybe if there's someone listening now who's been physically abused, if there's someone who's experienced wounds from family, where you can have a grace moment that act done against me, there's an inner sanctum of who I am, and that act doesn't change that. My identity is still intact, and then therefore I'm able to begin to look a little bit with eyes of mercy on this person.
And I'm still worthy.
Mm-hmm.
We have learned a lot today. And by the way, if you are struggling on your path to freedom through forgiveness, because we all know that when you forgive, it is such a burden that is lifted off our heart, off our shoulders, and it gives us this sense of freedom immediately. Absolutely. And we've experienced that. I think everybody in this room can certainly say that we've experienced that. But your passion, Joe, is so incredible, and we can't thank you enough for being with us today. And if that word forgiveness is tough for you to handle, all you have to do is go to our website, timeforforgiveness.org, and take a look at the workbook and walk right through it. And it will start your path to forgiveness and, most importantly, your path to freedom. We can't thank you enough for being with us today. What a great guest you have been.
Yeah, what an honor.
And Joe, thank you sincerely for your heart and what you're doing.
You bet.
And the lives you're impacting is all about influence, and you're influencing so many people. And thanks for coming on the show and just being vulnerable and sharing your story.
Absolutely. So honored to be here.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much.
Wow, what an exciting episode. Thank you so much for listening and for watching Time for Forgiveness. Hey, listen, visit our website at timeforforgiveness.org. And here's the great news. You can now download our workbook. Just click on the QR code. It's that simple. You can also message us on our website because we read every single message, and we certainly love to help. You can also reach us on our socials on Instagram and Facebook, and you can email us, again, at info@timeforforgiveness.org. I'm Sean Parr for Bob and Kelly Pascuzzi. We'll see you next time on Time for Forgiveness.